Hello and welcome back to coverage here at GP Santa Clara. Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Eduardo Sajkalik, and we are ready for round 11 action. Eduardo, this is MTG Red Zone, and this is where things start to get pretty serious as we work our way up to the cut to top four. Both of these teams have already picked up 2 losses in the tournament. Remember, no buys for this tournament, so they've all been playing since the very first round. 2 losses each means that they are on the fringe of elimination.
Right. In team tournaments with no buys, sometimes you see an X3 team make the cut to top 4, but often people will draw. So the third loss does not usually say you are eliminated, but it pretty much says you're playing for, 5th to 8th,
right,
and just some cash, some pro points, have a good weekend, but not quite a stellar one.
Absolutely. So as we can see here, well, we've got a bit of a slugfest in our middle match. This is Modern. And it's 2 Monastery Swiftspears facing off against each other. Eric Severson versus Eric Froelich. We've got an Eric mirror match, both playing red. And, well, let's see how this one ends up panning out. Looks like Froelich is the one who's on the play here. He got in for a point of damage with his Monastery Swiftspear, but was attacked back from Severson. So Eric's down to 18 thanks to that fetch land. And how does this play out from here?
Well, there we go.
Ooh.
You can see it right here. The Searing Blaze cutting Eric Severson's pressure, dealing damage to him in the process. And, yeah, I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen a red mirror. It seems like a lot of the top-end teams of this field have decided, you know what I want to play in Modern? Burn. Yep. I think Burn is well-positioned. We've seen it again and again. And this resurgence of Burn is starting to get confirmed. We're seeing a lot of the top teams run it in their Modern slot and doing well with it. So, yeah. I mean, here. So for people who haven't quite followed maybe 1 or 2 of the burn mirrors that we had yesterday, being on the play, especially Game 1, is important. But the cards you're going to want to see both Game 1 and Game 2 are cards like Searing Blaze. Deal free damage to the creature, deal free damage to the player. So deal both with the threat that can deal permanent damage over time and deal damage to the player. And this matchup is about valuing your creatures as much as possible in Game 1, because Game 2, more the max number of Searing Blazes comes in, Searing Blood may come in as well, and the creatures get a lot less value, which makes the mirror very interesting because a lot of the times you're going to see things like Goblin Guide on defense. Goblin Guide deciding not to attack, and a lot more blocking, and people basically trying to choose, am I resource light or resource heavy, and how do I approach the matchup? Do I just have, because I'm resource light, so I have a lot of lands, do I just have to go for the throat? If I'm resource heavy, then I'm okay with trading with my opponent's creatures and going over the top that way.
So you see that Eric had a pretty big turn. Last turn, he cast a Monastery Swiftspear, or he attacked with his Monastery Swiftspear, as well as he's got an Eidolon of the Great Revel down on the battlefield, and Eric is out of gas here. Nothing going on the board, though he does have cards in hand and 2 lands to work with, so he should be able to rebuild something. But you can take a look at the graveyards, and outside of the lands, well, the players have exchanged equal resources here. Searing Blazes for Monastery Swiftspears across the board, but with that last turn, Eric rebuilding his board and his, as you put it, continuous forms of damage with these 2 creatures, including that Eidolon, which can get pretty annoying as long as you're ahead in that damage race. So Eric in a good position here. It looks like, excuse me, I shouldn't say Eric. Eric Froelich in a good position here with the 2 creatures, and one of them being the Eidolon of the Great Revel. We'll see how this goes.
Right.
Big turn here, though.
Yeah, so basically Eric decided to be on the front foot with the Swiftspear. Sorry, so yeah, Froelich decided to be on the front foot with Swiftspear and Eidolon of the Great Revel here. And it's really hard for Severson to really come back from this spot. Severson basically, because Severson doesn't have any creatures in play apart from the Swiftspear, Severson can't really block, which means that the Eidolon has to come off at some point. And life total-wise, that means that Eric is ahead because Eric can apply that continuous pressure. Eric Severson also has 2 more lands in hand, and being flooded in this matchup is a good way to be behind. So I'd say Froelich, if his hand is reasonable, i.e. 2 burn spells, probably has a good shot. But I think I can see from the flicker 2 lands. So this is going to come down to board management, most likely. Who can manage the board best? But yeah.
So the chat, by the way, tells us, Eduardo, that they have Eric at 100% to win it. And they also believe that Eric's playing very well this game. So I guess I'll buy it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. both Erics are actually playing this game well. Not just one of them, both. But in this case, you're going to see here Severson go for a risky block, which I believe is correct with the way the game has developed, using basically this Boros Charm with the Prowess trigger, right, to try to take out the
and the risky part here, right, is that Frolic is sitting there with 4 mana available and could easily just kill the Monastery Swift Spear here or fire off a bunch of damage. He is going for the big risky play here, though. He's going to have to rely on that Prowess trigger to try to eat the Eidolon of the Great Revel, get himself 4 damage plus an extra 2 on Severson. His life total's plummeting quite quickly, and there we go. It's a Lightning Helix from Frolic. He's going to fire that off on the Swift Spear in response. Sure, he takes 2 from his own Eidolon, but he's going to get rid of the Swift Spear, maintain the Eidolon, and gain 3 life out of the deal, too.
Right. Maintain board position, maintain damage. The Lightning Helix, again, acting as kind of...
you said it was like a 2-for-1.
Yeah, it's basically a divination in the burn matchup. You basically...
Divination, okay.
It's a very strange... It doesn't quite...
That is the weirdest divination ever, but I can see what you're saying. You're getting 2 cards for spending 1, which is what divination does.
Right. So you can see the burn matchup as this combination of who has the most divinations in a way. The most Searing Blazes, the most Searing Bloods, the most Lightning Helixes. Cards that are 2-for-1s. Because your goal is to damage your opponent.
Yeah, this one's just falling apart, though, for Severson. That last sequence really did define this game. He fires off Riftbolt to kill the Eidolon, but he's got to take another 2 to do it. He's down to 4 facing Monastery Swiftspear. Any burn spell in Eric's deck wins the game for him here, and the shields are fully down for Severson as well. So if he can just fire off a Lightning Bolt or anything, there we go. Lava Spike is good enough for the win, and Eric Frolic wins his first game. As we can see, once again, Ben Stark playing very quickly. He's playing standard this time around, and boy, he's already up a game over Ben White's on that first table as well. Paulo Vitor Dominarosa and Ethan Gajewski are fighting it out. In fact, why don't we take a look at that? They're playing, good timing for us, huh, Eduardo? They're playing Legacy down here, and I see a Jace the Mind Sculptor, Snapcaster Mage, and Ethan... well, let's just say he was way ahead and able to finish off that game against Paulo Vitor. And he's going to pick up the first game for his side of the table there.
Right. So, you could notice kind of at the end of the game, not just the
take a deep breath here, Eduardo.
Yeah, go for it.
Give me a sip of this Arnold Palmer here, buddy. This one's going fast and furious on us.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine who introduced me to Arnold Palmer, and that was a revelation right there.
Me too, man. I live by these things. You know, I make them at home.
Oh, okay.
I brew my tea. I got the special lemonade.
I got to get better at that.
You should come visit me in Seattle. I'll make you a great AP.
Actually, I love the visit to Seattle, although I think this is going to be a controversial statement, but I prefer Vancouver just next door. But you know what? Both are great. You know, coming from a Canadian, I have to just say whatever, man. The problem is I also love Vancouver. I go visit Vancouver. I live in Seattle. It's 2 hours away, and I go up there because there's so much great stuff. So I can't really argue with you, although on the city power rankings, Seattle is higher than Vancouver. That's just a fact, though. It's just the power rankings. You can't argue with it. So. Yeah, but we can both agree top 5, top 10 easily.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I chose to live in Seattle, but I was also born there, so... Yeah. Montreal.
But I mean, you live where you were born, right? I don't actually.
You're like 4 countries.
I'm actually thinking. I do not believe that's ever been the case since I was 1.5 years old. That actually has not happened.
That's really funny. Oh man, France, England. Now you're in Canada.
Yeah, travel all over.
And you travel all the time too. It's not like you're always in Canada. Looks like we're on Shuffle Cam here, by the way, for those of you wondering, hey, why aren't we watching any Magic? Well, there isn't any show at the moment, but we will have some once they're ready to go. So all told, the players will look over to the right and left and say, how did it go, gents? And Eric Frolic's team will say, pretty good. We won our first 2 of our first 3 games, so not too bad. In the meantime, well, we can see why this game went quickly here on Table A. This is standard, and as you can see, Ben Stark firing off a shock on his opponent's Soulscar Mage. That can only mean one thing. We got a red mirror here, Eduardo.
Yeah, this is very fascinating. How many mountains are we seeing on both sides here?
No kidding. So we have 2 red mirrors and then some Jace the Mind Sculptor mirror down in
Yeah, in the Legacy, the matchups are very similar. Basically, Ethan has the more grindy value deck, Paolo going for the Noble Hierarchs and the speed instead. But basically, those two have to make up for all the value that the other two are declining to go for.
By the way, there he is, Glorybringer. We know how good that card can be. And we know that these red decks tend to try to go a little bit bigger after the sideboard, and we see that paying off for Ben White's here. No play from Ben Stark. By the way, how did we end up with a Ben mirror and an Eric mirror?
They're also playing actual mirror matches with mountains and red
I
cards.
know. What's going on?
This is great.
We've got Ben on red against Eric with Eric on red against Eric. Yeah, this is just it's just got a little weird. But I will remind you, by the way, we're in MTG Red Zone here, and that means that we're working our way up to the top 4. And this is an important round for these teams because an additional loss, Eduardo, almost for sure eliminates them from top 4 contention here. So every round and through MTG Red Zone until we get to our top 4 they're going to be elimination rounds like this. And, well, the teams just have nothing to give. It's that simple.
Yeah, this is do or die time, as they say.
Indeed.
And these red mirrors can get very tricky. Getting the right tempo on them, making sure that you manage how to deal with creatures and when you go, to face, is very... Basically, it's almost like a little dance. You have to figure, how is this going to play out? How are we going to work out on the tempo? And yeah, here Ben is like, okay, I got to catch up.
Yep, he's going to try to catch up. Is there an answer? Yes, but it does take 2 Abrades to shoot down the big dragon there. So has to be a favorable interaction there for Ben Stark, especially if he can follow it up here with another big threat.
Right, and that's why Glorybringer can be quite powerful in these red mirrors when they don't finish too quickly. It's almost always a 2-for-1. It's either a creature and a removal spell, or it's 2 removal spells. Or it could even be, as Ben Stark had to do, 2 removal spells and the creature lost. The only card that can really break the Glorybringer here is Chandra's Defeat. I'll double check how many copies each player has here. But it's
what
roughly
was Ben
2.
Stark doing there on the end step? I couldn't quite see. Did you catch it? He tapped 2 lands, put something in his yard. Was he cycling something, or
it was probably sacrificing a Suncourt Desert for damage. But yeah, this Hazoret the Fervent.
Oh, okay, I didn't see him pick up a land, but yeah. All right, well, yeah, here's Hazoret the Fervent in any case, and this is going to be a major issue here for Ben White's because he's down to 8.
Yeah. So yeah, here Ben Weiss counters with Soulscar Mage, which is one of the only cards alongside with the Chandra's Defeat in his hand that can actually kill a Hazoret the Fervent in the red mirror. However, Ben Weiss is in this hard position where he has to decide, do I just fire this off?
So chat's got our back here. They said they believe it was double lightning strike.
Oh.
Like upstairs,
Yeah.
Hazoret the Fervent.
Right. So that explains why Ben went all the way from a healthy 19 to a less healthy 8.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And now once again, Ben White's finds himself ahead of the game here as the life totals are pretty close in the middle at 8 to 10, and he's the one left standing with the creature left over. Somehow these players have been able to deal with both of the big threats on either side, starting with Glorybringer, another Glorybringer, and yes, even a Hazoret, thanks to Soulscar Mage, actually does, die.
Yeah, that's correct. And that sequence is super interesting because Ben Weiss went for the play of going Chandra's Defeat and had an Abrade just in case Ben could respond with a shock. But if Ben had a Lightning Strike and an Abrade, that would basically have been lights out. Mm-hmm. But Ben Weiss, I think, correctly decided I have to go for it. There's not really much of an option. But yeah, this is quite entertaining. Ben is known for loving his Dunes of the Dead, for making a little bit of a zombie there.
Yeah, Ben Stark, of course, made it to the finals of a Grand Prix with his own take on Ramen Up Red. We called it Desert Red. And I don't believe that's what he's playing here. I think he's on an older version of Ramen Up Red. Like, he's not playing any, Sand Stranglers here, is he, Stark?
I'll double check. I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think he's back on his normal version.
Yes. He's just playing 1 Dunes of the Dead for value.
He loves that card. He's got it there, too. Oh, another Glorybringer here for Stark, though.
Yeah, and with Ben Weiss only having 1 card,
he's got to just effectively chump block capital The Monkey.
Capital T Monkey.
Yep, and he's going to start chucking Ramanop Ruins, but with 2 mountains in hand. That's the match going to Ben Stark. So he's going to pick up his match for his team, and means that if Efro can beat Eric Severson here on table B, then the round's over. But it looks like he can't. We're going to go to game 3 on this one. Severson picking up the win against Froelich in another red mirror, though this time in Modern, and evening things up at 1 game apiece there on B. So we've got a real round on our hands here, Eduardo. This one could get intense.
Yeah, you could see there Eric keeping the Eidolon for the post-sideboard games, and also, Eric Severson and Eric Froelich being stuck on 1 land was probably not optimal.
Mm-hmm. Should we just call Ethan Paulo? Should we just Paulo Gajewski? Is that rude? We probably shouldn't do that, right? All right, we won't do that. But check this out. Sylvan Library in effect for Paulo Vitor Damarosa. You and I had a nice chat about that yesterday, Eduardo. Kind of an interesting card that you don't really see in other formats outside of Legacy much, and it's a good one. Here's Ponder as well for Paulo. Yeah. You can take a look at Sylvan Library. A card that they would never print now on many levels, not just power level, but also color pie considerations. And this is one of those cards that was printed in Legends early in Magic's history, 1994, something like that. And, they didn't really have it sorted out quite in the way we do about which colors get which powers and how those things all pan out. And this one, it stands out as a very strange card for now. Yes. Rashad thinks, he's like, nah, they nailed it. Got it right. Never a problem.
But yeah, and you can see, because of the life totals, we can actually see the story of the Sylvan Library. Paulo, in these matchups, you almost always, on the first Sylvan Library, just go, I'm going to pay 8 life. I'm going to pay, because Sylvan Library allows you to basically draw your first 3 cards, keep 1 of them. There's more text, but that's essentially what it does, given no other interaction. However, you can pay 4 life to keep additional cards rather than put them on top. And in these grinding mirrors, it's almost always correct to just keep the cards, no matter what they are, because you get them out of the way. You can brainstorm them later with a fetch land. So Paulo should be pretty far ahead just because of that Sylvan Library.
Oh, look at that. Marsh Casualties out of the sideboard for Ethan Gajewski takes care of True Name Nemesis. One of the few ways, especially given that Paulo has 2 creatures on the battlefield, to actually get rid of that card.
Yeah, that you were commenting on why that Marsh Casualties was there. Well, this is basically why.
That's it. Yeah, makes perfect sense. I remember that card in Limited. It was a powerhouse. But, oh boy, now it's great. Yeah, in Legacy somehow.
Yeah, the reason as well that Ethan is playing Marsh Casualties over the more popular in the past Golgari Charm is because Ethan is playing Baleful Strix and Snapcaster Mages. So you don't want to kill off your own value creatures. They do help to win the game, so the non-symmetrical side is much nicer. The fact that you can kick it and kill Deathrite Shamans in the late game is also great.
Yes. But Paulo Vitor Damarosa is not slowing down here. He's also got a Vendilion Click. And remember, both players with Deathrite Shamans available as well.
Yeah, and Deathrite Shaman here is why Paulo decided, well, I don't want to lose too much life here from my Sylvan Library. The first cards, for sure, you need to, pretty much, just to be ahead. But after that, the Deathrite, if you decide to start drawing cards after that, the Deathrite Shaman can start dealing that life loss that is going to be very hard to stop. Deathrite Shaman being a very efficient threat in that sense. And yeah, here you can see that's why Paulo didn't keep. Basically paid life to keep some cards.
And there we go. There's a Daze. And now the trigger from Vendilion Click will resolve, revealing a Brainstorm and a Toxic Deluge here for Gajewski. So he has come to the table packing, ready to kill any creatures on the other side, including True Name Nemesis.
Yeah, well, especially True Name Nemesis.
Indeed.
Paulo is playing 4 copies of the card, so Ethan needs ways to destroy that card, and the best way to do so is those -X/-X effects. Since it only has 1 toughness, it's very easy to kill with those effects.
So I'm assuming that Paulo did make him put it on the bottom of his library there. Yeah, it looks like he did. So now his hand is Brainstorm Scalding Tarn, which, while it doesn't do anything on its own, that's a lot of potential in that hand.
Yeah.
Fetch land plus Brainstorm, you know how that can go.
Right, so what happens here is, in a normal format, Ethan would draw a land and the game would be roughly over. But because of Brainstorm, Ethan can decide, you know what, this land isn't very good, so I'm going to draw 3 more cards, and I'm going to keep the best 2 plus a fetch land to shuffle away the cards that won't give me utility here. He didn't draw super well off the Brainstorm. It seems like it was 2 more lands, a Force of Will, and a Deathrite Shaman, so not optimal. So probably Ethan's going to put back 2 lands, use the fetch land to get rid of those 2 lands, and then play the Deathrite Shaman here.
So how will it play out with Deathrite Shaman ×2 on either side? I mean, they can start kind of fighting over cards in the graveyard, right?
Yeah, you actually pointed out one of the most key interactions with Deathrite Shaman, which is Deathrite Shaman for all its modes target. Even the mana ability is not a mana ability in the classical sense. You have to exile the card for it to happen. So what a player can do is, if the card is gone, potentially due to another Deathrite Shaman, then you don't get the effect. So it's basically Paolo and Ethan having to do this little dance again of who does what and at what time. Paolo being at a lower life total means that he basically is going to not be he should not be too aggressive with his Deathrites is the most likely scenario. And he's more likely going to look to counter Ethan's Deathrites as the path to victory. Especially because whoever goes first usually does the first abilities, but then the other person gets to untap and do what they want.
And then it becomes like who has more mana and who wants to leave what available. It's a kind of an interesting little dance. Interestingly as well, it often leads to neither player doing anything. Because oftentimes you're disincentivized to be the first one to act. You know, if you can be the last one, well, then you're the one that gets the card.
Exactly. The interesting thing, though, is Ethan could force the issue because Paolo has to respect the Snapcaster Mages.
Sure, good point.
Right, so...
That's interesting.
Yeah. And also, if you're the first one to go for the Deathrite Shamans, you get to choose which card is gone. Which is
That's true.
Yeah.
Even if it's not you who ends up exiling it.
Right, exactly. You can see here that Paolo's being very conservative now with Sylvan Library. Paolo probably feels very ahead in this game, or like relatively ahead, so he doesn't want to take the chance of drawing an extra card and opening a path to victory to Ethan that otherwise would not be there. He feels that, like, essentially, I draw 3 cards, I pick the best one. That's already pretty good.
By the way, you know, Paulo's one of the best players ever to play our game. You know, one of the best players in the room, bar none. He tweeted yesterday, after having played this deck all day, he said, I went 6-2 yesterday, you know, himself, or his team went 6-2 yesterday, probably need a 5-0-1 to top 4. He said, I'm playing Legacy. The format is hard. So many micro decisions that cost you if you get them wrong. You know, and I always find that interesting because it can feel like these guys make it look easy. You know, like, oh, it's Paolo. He's going to do it right. He's going to figure it out. He's having a hard time. You know, he's like, wow, there is a lot going on. And if I make one little slip up, it really punishes me.
And that's entirely correct. Like, for example, even this Abrupt Decay, right? Like, it only really is good against Leovold and Deathrite Shaman, and it's not a card that would otherwise be that optimal in the matchup. But it's fascinating here to see the sequence, right? This Abrupt Decay firing, the Deathrite Shaman responding by trying to exile a Fatal Push, the Deathrite Shaman from Paolo exiling his own Fatal Push, and even with the Snapcaster Mage here, while Paolo's tapped out, well, you're going to see the effects here.
What, does he have his own push or no, Pyroblast? Sure.
Right, so here...
And no mana left over for Paolo to activate his own Deathrite, and so that resolved.
Right, that was the other thing, is like when you're short on mana, that's a good time to use your Deathrite Shamans. If your opponent... Because Paolo is constrained with 3 lands to Ethan's 4, and also Paolo is the one with Sylvan Library doing action. Ethan correctly realizing that Vanilla Clique would end the game. So, yeah, that's why Ethan went Pyroblast, killed the Vanillion Clique, and that's also why Paolo decided here to take 4 life because essentially there's only 1 Deathrite Shaman left. The clock is a lot slower.
Yeah, and now it's 2 Deathrites to 1 as well, so Paolo, assuming that he can keep mana up at most junctures, will be able to win those Shaman fights. Oh, and there's another True Name Nemesis now for Paulo Vitor Damarosa and a land. He's going to pass the turn back to Gaeski.
Right. And here you can see some more of these micro decisions coming into play. Basically, Gaeski could respond to Paolo's fetch lands, and Paolo wouldn't have mana to activate his own Deathrites, apart from using both, exiling a land plus exiling the card to get the mana and then use the ability. But basically here, if Ethan cannot get rid of this True Name Nemesis, I would say that one hit from that True Name is probably going to spell end of the game for Ethan here. And yeah, here you can see one of the hardest cards in the format in Ponder. Basically, Ethan going, are the cards on top what I need to potentially win this game? The Kolaghan's Command is probably the main consideration because it's the main value card. Seeing Fatal Push, Kolaghan's Command with what's in front, I would potentially shuffle, but Ethan chooses to keep. So I'm actually curious to see what line there is and what we can glean from it later.
Okay, well, his hand doesn't look super great here. I mean, he does have the Fatal Push, which he can use to take down a Deathrite Shaman, but True Name Nemesis just looms large over this board. I mean, this is the type of creature that demands very specific answers. And even though we have actually seen that Ethan has brought many copies of those type of answers to the board, from his board, doesn't have any in his hand right now.
And yeah, I can now see what Ethan's line is.
What is he doing? What's going on here?
Right. So it took me a little while to figure it out, but which is why that Ponder was also taking Ethan some time. But basically, his line is, I'm going to Fatal Push now, a Deathrite Shaman, because then I can use Kolaghan's Command as a way to both kill the Deathrite Shaman in play, and potentially force the issue. So he's probably going to use the Kolaghan's Command to make Paolo discard a card, killing the Deathrite, since the graveyard utility mode is probably unlikely to happen. And then Ethan can, once the 2 Deathrites from Paolo are gone, Ethan's Deathrite can basically take over by exiling free spells. Right. Let's see. So yeah, so here Paolo deciding to go for Deathrite Shaman and gain life rather than make Ethan lose life, which makes sense since Paolo has the free 1 continual pressure, which Ethan doesn't.
Does Ethan still have a Snapcaster in his graveyard as well?
I'm not sure, since
because he can Kolaghan's Command that back, right, and then use the Marsh casualties from before to finish off Paolo's board. We're in a kind of an awkward situation here as well. So Eric Severson and Eric Froelich are playing the Mono Red Mirror on B, and they're in game number 3 right now. We could go over there. Would you like to go over there, Eduardo? What do you think?
It's really tough. This game is incredibly...
Because this has been a great game, and we followed it the whole way, but we don't want to miss the decider necessarily. But obviously we can't watch both at the same time.
Yeah, this is kind of tough. Like, basically, it's how much do we want to see of the Burn Mirror, which is still an interesting matchup, but in a very different manner. This game is going to last a while, but if Eric Froelich wins his game, then we're not even going to see the end of this legacy match.
Well, yeah, we may get to see a little bit of it. All right, I'm going to ask chat, because this is one of those tough spots where I only got a pair of eyeballs here, and okay, good. They want to stay. That was my inclination as well, is that, like, I want to see how this game goes. It's just tough because you know how the mono red goes. There's a really good chance that we miss the end of the match there. But, of course, you will be updated on it. We'll keep you updated on it as we go. But let's stay here and see how it goes. Everybody wants to watch Legacy. Gotcha, loud and clear, kiddos. That was my inclination as well. And we are going to stay here as Jace the Mind Sculptor hits the battlefield for Paulo Vitor Damarosa. Yeah, baby.
Yeah, and
I'm not leaving Jace. Jace, I'm going to stay with you, buddy.
Yeah. This is actually a really interesting play as well from Paulo, because you don't attack with a True Name Nemesis here because it unlocks the Snapcaster Mage. But now Paulo's shields are down. The Deathrite Shaman can't counter the other Deathrite Shaman. So this Kolaghan's Command has full access to whatever it wants to do. Let's see the modes. I think killing the Deathrite Shaman is basically up like 100%.
Right, and then I think he's going to have him discard. He's down to 1 card in hand.
Yes. It was actually really interesting here that Paulo decided to gain life exactly that turn, getting rid of the Deathrite Shaman. But yeah, it seems like Ethan still had access to another Deathrite Shaman. So Ethan preferring to keep Paulo short on cards, it seems here. And yeah. Wow. Flusterstorm. That is a card right here.
Hello. All right, so explain to us what happens now.
Okay. So this is actually kind of... so basically, Ethan would have had the option to still use his Deathrite Shaman. But essentially, Paolo is taking away that option by using the Flusterstorm, so he'll be discarded anyways, which forces Ethan's shields to go down and Ethan to put less pressure. So you can actually see that Flusterstorm as gain 2 life.
Okay. Because it forced him to use his Deathrite Shaman to pay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So Paolo...
And by the way, watch the explosions here, because Paolo is now... That was his upkeep/draw step using his Sylvan library. He also has Jace the Mind Sculptor on the battlefield still, too. So maybe a fetch land or something, but he's going to be able to restock and reload his hand very quickly here.
Yes, and right now the race is essentially between Paolo's life total and Paolo's value.
It looks like Paolo might... He's actually considering bouncing a creature. Yeah, reconsidered. What does he have in his hand? A Vendilion Click?
Yeah, so maybe here Paolo is considering, do I want to play Click first, get the information, or do I want to brainstorm? This is actually really... This is where those micro plays come into play. You have all these options, but then what do you actually do? Because if you cast a Vendilion Click and then brainstorm, that's probably not the right sequence in terms of mana efficiency, but it's the right sequence in terms of, well, what do I care about from this brainstorm?
Sure. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Ben Stark was sitting next to Paolo at this point. By the way, remember, Ben already won his match 2-0. So he's probably sitting next to him, and they're having a discussion about it. I saw, and the reason I think that is I saw Paolo point to Jace, but also not brainstorm. And that would make me think that he said, well, we could do this, that kind of thing. All right, well, there it is. Vendilion Click hits the stack. I didn't see the card. Did you look at the card from Gaiaski? What was it?
Sure, it was a Force of Will. And here, Paolo uses the secret mode of Vendilion Click. You may. You may, yeah. He said, I'm going to let you keep the Force of Will. He's not worried about it at all. It's not a card that he's concerned about at the moment. And he's actually going to Fate Seal Gaiaski here as well. He gets to look at the top card. It's basically Scry U. Yes.
I look at the top card of your library, and I can put it on the top or back or on the bottom of your library as I see fit. And when your opponent Fate Seals you and puts the card back on top, it is a miserable feeling. Like, you just know you're not drawing anything relevant this turn. Yep. Oh, what a beating.
Yeah, this is pretty... But, like, from Paolo's perspective, you can see, like, how these cards from Sylvan Library are meaning that Paolo cannot put pressure. Simply because if that Snapcaster attacked, if the Snapcaster Mage had attacked Paolo, then that Deathrite Shaman would have needed 1 turn less. So essentially, Paolo would have been forced to block with Vendilion Click, and Paolo doesn't want to do this. So that's why Paolo decided against attacking with a True Name here.
By the way, we do have an update from Table B. It actually ended up working out well for us having stayed here. Eric Severson defeats Eric Froelich 2-1. Ties up the round at 1 match apiece, and this one here in Legacy is going to be our decider. So this team who wins this round is still alive for top 4. They are by no means locked, but they are absolutely still alive for it. The team that loses this round, sorry, I hope you had a good weekend. Maybe you can win some pro points. And that means that if it is going to be really one of the best teams left standing, remember, Peach Garden Oath has been eliminated. Ben Stark, Eric Froelich, Paulo Vitor Dominarosa, triple Hall of Fame team. They're going to have to win this game and the next on the back of Paulo Vitor, or they're going to be out.
Yeah.
So no pressure, Ethan Gaiaski. Just just one of the next 2 games against one of our game's elite players, and you can keep your team alive.
Right. However, for Paolo fans and for fans of tense last match fans, Paolo looks pretty far ahead with this Leovold.
Do you think so? He now has True Name, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Leovold, a Vendilion Click, and he's had a Sylvan Library for 4 turns or 5 turns. So, yeah, I like his position here.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the second Tropical Island and Underground Sea, I would say this is a great cube deck.
I think I've drafted this deck more often than I'd like to admit.
Yeah.
This looks like my Canadian Highlander deck, actually. Wait a minute. I am playing all of those cards, actually. Oh, no, not True Name. I don't have True Name. It's a point. You don't want to...
you don't want to...
I didn't want it for a point, yeah.
That's fair enough.
All right, but it looks like offense has now begun, and this is really much a game about the Deathrite Shaman at this point, because Paulo's down to 3.
Yeah, this is really getting down to the wire. Paolo's basically priced into bouncing the Deathrite Shaman this turn, since going to -1 is not optimal.
Right.
Yeah, this turn Ethan drawing the Fatal Push, but having no Revolt triggers. That said, this Snapcaster Mage is a Revolt trigger. Paolo is forced to essentially block it, but Ethan decided against that. It's actually kind of interesting since if Ethan had gone for it, I don't think it changes the clock though. So I think Ethan was correct in not
to just prioritize activating the Shaman.
Yeah, I don't think it changes the clock here since basically by bouncing the Deathrite Shaman here, putting Paolo to 1. Paolo's probably going to attack with a Leovold here into the Snapcaster Mage. Anyways, and
force to block anyway.
Right. So like Ethan can use the Fatal Push anyways if he decides to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but it looks like the double bounce here from Paulo Vitor. He also conveniently had Ethan tap a land there to activate his Shaman, and let's see what Eric goes for. What Paulo goes for. He's just going to play a Jace to replace the other Jace. That gets him an activation now, bounce, and now a Fate Seal. He put the card back on top. I think that's about game then.
Actually, I think Paulo just lost this game.
You think he lost this game?
Revolt. Kill the Vendilion Clique, go to 2, re-attack with Snapcaster Mage. Unless Paulo top decks.
Did he forget?
No.
Oh, wow.
It was just the mystery card.
Ethan Gajewski steals this game from Paulo Vitor Damarosa. Oh, my God. I can't believe that just happened. You never see that.
Right. And actually here, it's actually kind of tough to say it was a missequence, if anything, since if Paolo had attacked first, Ethan could have blocked with the Deathrite Shaman, used the ability, and then attack with a Snapcaster Mage. So possibly there, because of the...
But there had to be something Paulo could do. He knew about the Fatal Push.
No, actually he didn't. It was a top deck.
I thought he put it back on top with the Jace.
Oh, it's okay. So first he put on top Tropical Island.
Okay.
And then he brainstormed, and then Ethan drew a mystery card.
Oh. Wow, what a crazy finish. Decided to just go for it, but Fatal Push was exactly what Ethan Gajewski needed. Yeah. And he got the job done. And you can see the look on Ifro's face there. That's how it feels. They've just been eliminated from top 4 contention. And we'll be following the Ben White's, Eric Severson, and Ethan Gajewski team as they work their way through MTG Red Zone. We've got a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll have Time Walk Magic. See you in a minute.